I'm here with Rachel Ullmann. She's the director of the Given Institute and just did a great show with you today. But we just wanted to hear a little bit about your backstory, like your upbringing and your Catholicism and how your parents raised you.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for having me. I am born and bred from Baltimore, Maryland, and I have always been Catholic. My parents raised me in the Catholic faith, and something that I'm especially grateful for in my childhood is that my parents had both had a personal relationship with Jesus and cultivated that in me as
I.e.,
well.
charismatic.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Yes.
uh,
Part of their story is they were both raised Catholic, born in the 50s and both raised Catholic, but soon left the faith after high school and fell away. And then they got married and had a difficult marriage. And it was a moment that my mom fell to her knees and had prayed for the first time in a long time and asked God to save her marriage.
that's early 70s.
This was in the early 70s, yeah.
Okay.
And the Lord, she heard a voice when she asked that prayer, and the Lord said to her, "Go to a Pentecostal meeting."
Hmm.
And at that time, my mom didn't know what a Pentecostal meeting was.
Hmm.
She literally looked up in the phone book Pentecostal, right,
Okay.
trying to figure out what this meant. And she went to a local charismatic prayer meeting. She was baptized in the Holy Spirit and came to a
In a
personal
Protestant
relationship with
church.
Jesus.
Yeah.
It was actually an Episcopalian church.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then she then started to pray that my dad would have a similar experience.
Right.
And he did. And he came to know Jesus in a personal way. And that brought them back to their Catholic faith.
Now they were raised in Baltimore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've heard George Weigel talk about that was like in the 50s. It was very much an intact Catholic culture, one of the last ones in the country or something. I don't know. But it didn't impart the faith to them in a really deep way.
Well, I think it was just the culture at the
Yeah.
time, the rebellion of the 60s and 70s when
Hmm.
they were coming of age, right? Just a lot of
Yeah.
confusion at that
Yeah.
time. And you're definitely right about the Catholicism of Baltimore. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
premier see, the original diocese, and I mean, there's a Catholic church every block in the
Hmm.
city, the largest Catholic school system at one point, no
Hmm.
longer, but so many Catholic high schools. One of the funny things we say about Baltimore is if you meet somebody at the airport, at a bar, whatever, you don't ask them, "Where'd you go to college?" When you say, "Where do you go to school?" "Where did you
Hmm.
go to school?" It means, "Where'd you go to high school?" And
All right.
typically a Catholic high school is a
Right.
very deep rooted
Yeah.
Catholic education network. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, so my parents came back to the Catholic faith through that experience of being baptized in the Holy Spirit. And so then my childhood was
Well,
I
how did
not.
your father come around?
Oh, yeah, you want to hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
It's very dramatic. So my mom had been praying for him, and she actually saw an advertisement for a pilgrimage with that charismatic group to the Holy Land. And my dad has always been a history buff, always been interested in archaeology. And so my mom thought, well, maybe this will be the way I'll get him, right?
Hmm.
So they signed up to attend this pilgrimage,
Hmm.
and they were in the city of Bethlehem and had done the tours during the day, and then they were at night in this field, and they were having a prayer meeting, and my dad was not having it. He was not happy. He kind of got duped into coming to this event,
Hmm.
right? So he's standing in the back of the prayer meeting in Bethlehem with his arms crossed, and he's smoking a cigarette. And then some shepherds from the area, local shepherds, came up to this crowd of people praying, and they asked to be prayed over. And so the Episcopalian priest that was leading the organization, leading the prayer meeting, prays over this very old man, and all of a sudden everybody started cheering. And my dad in the back, he puts out his cigarette, like, what's going on, right? And they start yelling, "He's healed, he's healed." And he had been healed of being deaf since birth. Like
Wow.
his kids, grandkids were there, and
Hmm.
they'll say he's never heard before.
Hmm.
And so my dad witnessed this miracle, and at that moment he said, "Jesus must be Lord." and I either have to give my life to him or I have to ignore what I just saw.
Right.
And so he walked up to the front and gave his life to Jesus, and
Oh.
there the story goes.
And then your family joined a Catholic charismatic community, right?
They
Yeah.
did. Yeah, they are still active members
Yeah.
of New Life,
Mm-hmm.
interdenominational charismatic group, and that's based in the Maryland area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up going to mass in the morning and then to prayer meetings in the afternoon throughout my whole childhood.
Mm-hmm. And today, are they? They're still practicing that. So, and you wound up going to Steubenville, and well, yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. Your birth was unusual, though, right? It took, yeah,
Yeah, I've got lots of miracle stories
yeah,
in my family. So, also a part of my parents' struggles in their early marriage is that they were unable to have children for 11 years.
mm-hmm.
And that took a toll on
Mm-hmm.
them. And of course, as any family, any married couple struggling with infertility, you get these feelings of, has God abandoned us? What's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with me? What's wrong with us? And so my grandmother, very devout, rosary praying grandmother who always watched EWTN all day long, she took a pilgrimage to Lourdes, and her request of the Blessed Mother was that my parents would be able to have a child. And amazingly, 9 months later, to my grandmother's visit there,
Mm-hmm.
I was born. And shortly afterwards, my mom contracted breast cancer, so she was unable to have any other children. So it was just a completely, my life is a miracle. Every life is a miracle. But sort of the drama around all of that story is something I also grew up with, right? Yeah. My parents told me this. My grandmother told me this. And so I always was just very keenly aware that my life is a gift and that I'm here because of an intentionality of God's design. And so I wanted to then use my life to serve him.
Right. So you go to well, first, you have the claim to fame of swum in the same pool that Michael Phelps did?
Yeah, I've got deep Baltimore roots. Michael Phelps, yep. We, I had a very just happy childhood, and I like to not just credit my parents for raising me in the faith, but also their deep devotion to being mom and dad and always being there for me and loving my activities. I mean, my dad was at every single softball game, every single swim meet. He would work his work schedule around being there for me. He would go in at 5 a.m. so that he could get out and come to my games after school. And I also, when I talk about women and their identity in Christ, I know that part of my confidence in the Lord is because of my parents' love for me, but also deeply how my father treated me growing up, that I always knew his unending love for me and that I was beautiful and desirable. And there just is something really to that I hope that parents take seriously about their role in forming their children, is that you definitely need to show your love for them in the simplest of acts, sitting down and having dinner together every night, going to those sports games, being interested in their friendships and their activities, and helping them pick healthy friendships around them as well.
Yeah. I remember hearing like this news commentator, big time person, and she talked about she used to watch the news with her father, and they would discuss it and debate it and things, and you could see how it just gave her a solidity and a confidence that like her ideas were respected or whatever, taken seriously, or and so I think that's great to point that out, because it seems like men, I don't know, patriarchy, however they define it, is being kicked around today, and seem like we need to talk about. Well, you talk about this, like what is that male charism that?
Yes.
How would you describe it? The masculine genius that had such a big impact on you. That
yes. Well, I can say that I saw that so clearly in in my own father, but also the other men in the charismatic community that I grew up with as my friends' dads,
Yeah.
right? That going to prayer meetings, I was able to see both men and women, but to see these lay men talk about their personal relationship with Jesus, and they knew scripture, and they would sing praise and worship songs at the tops of their lungs, things that maybe don't seem manly to culture. But it was, and they would be holding their wives' hands in the prayer meetings, and they would just have a presence of strength that was really powerful. And so that commitment to your wife and your children is definitely something that you can see in the commitment of Jesus to the church, right? And that's that whole bridal, analogy that Christ gave us, and that role of the bridegroom is really powerful. The protecting of your family, upholding your wife's dignity. Like, I'll share a good example with my own husband. You don't joke about or talk about other women's wives. Like he'll say that about our group of friends, You don't even really like give her an extra long hug or anything like no, right? You have your wife and your children. That's your family unit, and it doesn't get murky beyond that, right? And when a man's really strong in his convictions and in his fatherhood, his protection of his family, and just that strength in troubled times too, I think is something that I can really characterize from my own father, from my relationship with my husband, when things just seem too tough, like what we've been through with COVID, right? Like unbearable, when I will be weeping, right? My husband will be strong, right? And he will just convince me that it's all going to be okay and we can weather this storm. And so I might not be pinpointing every aspect of the masculine genius, but
it's a mystery. It's hard to just delineate precisely or whatever. But I heard one guy describe it too, that it's almost like you teaching your daughter in the way he treats his daughter. He's teaching her that you're worthy of respect and love, and this is what you are to expect from other men. The men that you would date, or what you would look for in a husband, is these kind of qualities. And because it just seems like so often you just see young women just like, why are you with this guy? I mean, it's just like this agonizing kind of thing, and that. And so, and I think too how, like the husband, the father's practice of the faith has a greater impact on the children's, practice of the faith.
Right.
Yeah, because I think
studies have said that.
Yeah, it's like they represent God the Father, I think, in the family and stuff, and that's what you project, or that's how we see God as a father. And I always say, like in my own life too, it's like I needed to hear that when I was discerning the call to religious life, that this is a good way to spend your life. This is and they use the word heroic, but this is a good thing to do, and because it was funny. I tell the story. My father passed away from cancer some years before I was looking at religious life, and I'm sitting in New Orleans with my grandfather, where he's lived, and we were having like crabs and crawfish and drinking a beer, and we weren't one to have heart-to-heart talks, but and he wasn't even very talkative. But I remember he told me, he said, "Well, how's it going?" I was in seminary and I was struggling, and I said, "I don't know," and he goes, and he picked up on it immediately. He said, "Well, don't start that static. That's a good life." And I remember he had like a Jack's beer or something.
I love it. And, I love it.
And it was so simple, but I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that he respected it, and respect what I was doing, And so I don't know what it is fully for the daughter or the woman, but I know like the man thing, respect and hierarchy, whatever.
Right. Men want to be respected. Women want to be loved.
Yeah.
Right. No, but that is so beautiful. And Right, that it was a very simple phrase, but you needed to hear it, that
Yeah.
affirmation.
Right. Right.
And I credit that for my father, is that he, as simple as, you look beautiful today, right?
Uh-huh.
Or you're worthy of respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to pour out more than that, just a very
Right.
simple, direct
Yeah.
affirmation of your identity.
Right.
And that is certainly something that I hope all men take to heart, is that there is power in your simple words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to Steubenville, which is kind of like a charismatic university, and you had a good experience there.
I
And how did
did.
that? How would you say that kind of shaped or formed you? What's the
Mm.
takeaway from that?
Well, the beautiful thing is that I was in high school. I went to a high school run by Nashville Dominican Sisters in the Baltimore
Oh
area.
yeah.
And so I already was being cultivated as a woman leader in
Uh-huh.
that incredible educational scenario in an all girls school. But I knew when I was 16 years old, I received this call from the Lord to give my life to Him and to serve Him in my career. And
Right.
so I said, well, I guess if I have to study theology, I got to go to Franciscan University,
Yeah.
because my family, of course, had been involved in the
Yeah.
charismatic movement, had been following Father Mike Scanlon for a long time. And so I didn't have any other options. I mean, I knew I wanted to go to Franciscan and
Mhm.
study theology and religious education. So I went there and I had an incredible experience, primarily because of the community built there.
Uh-huh.
I would actually pinpoint that rather than the academics. The academics were great too, but
The
it
household
really,
system.
yes, the
Yeah.
household system of being united with other women that wanted to support you in your faith,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And really, the experience of studying abroad in Austria was the greatest takeaway of
Mm.
my Franciscan U years, because to be immersed at 19 years old in this incredible, you live in the Cartauza, which is an old Carthusian monastery, right? You live in this
Yeah.
gorgeous place in the foothills of Austria, but ultimately your entire academic calendar is structured around you traveling on the
Mm.
weekends. So you go to school Monday through Thursday, you're off, right? From Thursday night to, you got to get back Monday morning. And being a part of Franciscan and everything's based on your spiritual life, we took pilgrimages
Right.
every weekend. We
Right.
weren't going out to the pub, Not
Right.
that we didn't do that, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the focus of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was ultimately to continue growing in your relationship with the Lord. So I went to Poland and did a JP2 pilgrimage. I
Mm.
went to Rome. I went to some beautiful cathedrals in Belgium and the Netherlands. I went to see Lourdes, so many places at 19 years old, right? And when you're just looking at it, it's just right in front of you, the depth of our history of our Catholic faith, you'll never forget that.
Right.
You never forget
Right.
it. And I know that that was one of the most formative experiences of my life, and
Yeah.
doing it with friends. I wasn't
Yeah.
just solo going around,
Right.
going
Right.
on these pilgrimages. I was with people my age,
Mhm.
men and women, who wanted to grow in holiness. They wanted to get their medals blessed. They wanted to get
Mhm.
those rosaries. And so it just becomes a part of your lifestyle when
Mm.
when you have an experience like that.
Yeah. So it wasn't ultimate frisbee.
I did.
That's what I was doing in
Flag
college.
football was pretty fun too. That was pretty fun. No, I mean, I
Yeah.
have great memories, and I think what's so funny, people will say, "Oh, wow, like you didn't drink in college. You
Mm.
didn't have all the typical right college
Yeah.
experiences." I said, "No, and I still had fun.
Yeah.
I had incredible fun.
Yeah.
We would pull pranks on each other. We
Right.
certainly do the young adult, funny,
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
things. There's all these traditions in Steubenville where you go down by the river and you have bonfires when you're not supposed to,
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that. But none of it was destructive behavior
Right.
that would ultimately harm your soul,
Right.
right?
Right.
And thank God for that. Thank
Mhm.
God that there is a place, and there are many
Yeah.
universities that are fostering this type of wonderful friendships and lifestyle for young people so that they don't have the damage and the trauma that is happening, sadly, on lots of college campuses.
Yeah, and you mentioned that community and the household system. And I remember hearing Father Scanlon say that's because Steubenville kind of, I guess, bottomed out in the 70s. The Franciscan did, and
Right.
so he credited the renewal to that household system, to revitalizing it. And
Yeah, and I really think that that is because of the empowerment of the laity that happened in the charismatic renewal. That is really powerful. That, like I said before, for me to be able to grow up seeing lay men and women, preaching isn't the right word, but giving
witness, testimony,
witness to the scriptures and
catechizing.
evangelizing. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every year part of growing up in the charismatic community was we would go on retreat together and everybody would stand up and give their witness for the year, what the Lord's done in my life, right?
Wow, yeah.
And it could be as simple as I was struggling financially and I felt peace after prayer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or it could be a full-blown miracle healing story of, I couldn't walk. I mean, I saw miracles like that happen, of healings, people on crutches that then were able to stand and be able to walk after being prayed over. I've been slain in the spirit. I've had those kinds of experiences, very dramatic experiences, right? In faith. And I really believe that part of that empowerment of the laity and that universal call to holiness that we received out of Vatican II, and that the church has really done a great job of catechizing all persons to know that they can be holy. I think Steubenville fostered that really well in the household system, right?
Yeah.
And did that even you, as an 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, you can be active in your faith and in a peer network with one another, call each other onto holiness and grow in holiness. And it isn't just reserved for the clergy or those in religious life, right? That all of us are called to be holy.
Yeah, and I feel like I've seen that grow in my lifetime, just here, like the number, because we see all these people in apostolates and everything, and just the growth of that, all these initiatives to evangelize. I mean, just you go to like a SEEK conference of Focus, you got like 25,000 college students. I mean, that gets your attention. It's like, I mean,
it does.
I mean, that wasn't my college experience back in the 80s, but it was, it's powerful. And so you went on to get a master's degree, right? And you worked for the Archdiocese of Baltimore for a while. And
Right. Yeah, like I said, when I was 16, I heard that call from the Lord to be a leader and to give my career to Him. So I've always worked for the church since I graduated from Franciscan. I came back home to Baltimore, and I've had lots of different positions in churches and schools in the Archdiocese. I've worked at the Catholic Center and the central offices, and always had a deep love for bringing my gifts to what I love most, which is Christ in the church.
Right. Now, some people, they don't feel like they have gifts for leadership. They don't want to be a leader. Do you still describe them as leaders, or how does that work?
Well, I think some people have the wrong definition of leaders.
Okay.
Because let's say, picture a leader. Who would first come to mind? You probably say the president, right? Or you would say Pope Francis, or someone very public, right? And that's something that I actually hope, as part of my role in Given, is to start changing that viewpoint of leadership. Is that in any sphere of influence, in any circumstance that you find yourself in, that God has placed you in, that you can execute leadership, that you can be a leader. And that means using your gifts for others and drawing them into a better place. Right? So a grandmother is a leader to her grandchildren, right? A person who maybe is in a very low level position in the company, right? But inspires others to do better.
Right.
they're a leader.
Right.
And so it doesn't have anything to do with a certain platform, microphone, title. It's truly about knowing yourself, knowing the gifts God has given you, and using them and thriving in them.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is leadership.
Right. I wanted to talk about, discerning your gifts. Can you talk about more about that process?
Well, you just mentioned too, if someone doesn't see herself as a leader. Well, there are certainly some women who say, well, I don't have a gift.
Yeah.
What is my gift,
Yeah.
right? And that lack of confidence stems from not knowing her identity in Christ, right? And it stems from not knowing that she is a unique and unrepeatable creation. And that's where we're getting all of our sin is rooted in not knowing our identity in Christ. And so the first step to finding your gifts is to first know that you are a gift. That even if you never hold a outward leadership position, right? If you never do anything noticeable, your life is still a gift. Like Saint Therese is such a great example of this, right? Yeah. She is the patroness of missionaries, and she didn't leave her hometown except for one trip to Rome where she begged the Pope to please let me be a Carmelite, even though I'm 15, right? And they won't let me in, right? And so even in very little ways, right? Women and all humans can be leaders. So the very first step is to know that you are a gift. And Saint Therese knew that. She knew she was a gift, right? That she was a unique creation of God. And then when you know your incredible worth, right? And no matter your outputs and your outcomes, that your life is a gift and you're loved unconditionally by God, right? Then can you really start to discern, all right, well, what are those unique qualities that I have that the person next to me doesn't have, right? Yeah. That God has created us each differently, right? Equal, but different, right? And so we help women to discern what are those unique patterns that only I have. What is that pattern of motivational design that's within me, right? What we try to do with the young women is to help them first to think about what are some things that really are my jam? What am I really good at, right? Is it that I have a certain passion, a certain hobby, a certain maybe creative bent, or what is it not necessarily within the confines of your job description at work, right? Or maybe where you find yourself in your current life circumstances, but think about what is a time in my life when I really felt passion, right? When I really felt excited about something that I did, right? And everybody has a story deep within them. They do, right? Even those who struggle with deep pain and suffering and trauma, there is a glow in everyone somewhere, right? And so we help the women to find what is that moment of excitement, that deep fulfilling story in your life when you just really knew, man, I did that well. I was really proud of it. And I felt very fulfilled by that activity or whatever that thing is that I did. And so when she tells that story to her mentor, then her mentor will keep asking her questions to go deeper into that story of, well, what are you learning about yourself because of that, right? What maybe is a charism that is embedded within that story? Okay, so do you have a gift of public speaking, maybe? Do you have a gift of administration? Do you have a gift of hospitality? What are some of those common patterns, those common traits that as you get to know a woman and her stories of excitement, of love and passion, that then can help her discover her gift that only she can give, and that hopefully then she will use that to serve God through executing something awesome for him.
And part of their acceptance into the given program is they have to already have some goals or something, right? So they have,
Yeah.
in some degree, they've discovered maybe a gift or
Oh,
something.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's a good point
Mhm.
too, is that women all throughout their 20s, ages 21 to 30, are able to apply, and we definitely have more applicants than spots that we can fill
Mhm.
each year. And so part of our discernment process in selecting the women who come to the forum each year is looking for those leadership traits that she's already
Mhm.
executed in her life,
Yeah.
right? Confidence in her gifts,
Right.
right?
Right.
Self-knowledge, right,
Mhm.
of who God has created her to be. So oftentimes, the women that are selected to come to the Given Forum are women that have some strength in confidence in their skills and their
Mhm.
giftings, and have had some of those experiences where they've tested some things out and they haven't worked, and so they've pivoted. Right? The
Right.
great art of continuing to discover yourself. And so, yes, there is some pattern of leadership within the women already when they come to the forum, and that just continues to blossom and develop.
And as a priest, the thing I most hear too is like people want to get married. Like, how can I find a husband?
Mm.
Um, is that ever like a executable? How do you say that? Planned thing at the end. Like, this is what you need to get married. And if you guys have
Dating
developed
advice.
yeah, what do you tell young people about getting married? Does that come up for
Yeah,
you all? Yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah,
it absolutely does. The
yeah.
majority of the women are single that
Mhm.
come to the forum and then work with their mentors. And yes, I mean, their monthly meetings with their mentors, they talk about everything from
Mhm.
work to dating to some all different struggles that they face.
Yeah,
And that does come up a lot, is trying
yeah,
to find a good husband, trying to find
yeah,
a good man. And so we don't tell the mentors what they need to
yeah.
say to
Right,
the women
right.
in those scenarios.
Yeah.
But the great thing is that we are giving these young adult Catholic women who are struggling someone to talk to about it,
Mhm.
right? Someone who loves them and cares for them and wants what's best for them, right? And maybe to get some advice from someone outside of their immediate family who might be pressuring them a lot of, oh, you're
Yeah,
getting older, you got to find
yeah,
somebody,
yeah,
right? So talk to someone about those pain points, and to pray in those pain points, and surrender trust to the Lord in that struggle, because that we definitely hear that a lot from young
yeah.
women.
How do y'all balance, it's like telling them, you hear people say, well, you can't settle or you got to change. What do you tell people about, how much can you change and should you change realistically? Those kind of things. That's like a big question. I always tell guys sometimes, well, get the job part right, get the career part right. Where do you? It seems like that's kind of more attractive to women. You got your stuff together. I can hitch my wagon to this guy. He's moving forward. And, work on that. And
Yeah.
I don't know the converse for the women, but that seems more complicated. But
I would never say to a woman, you need to settle,
yeah,
you need to
uh,
change. However, I do think that Catholic culture can set the expectations a little too high
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
in the dating
right,
world.
right,
And so I do think that there is a natural process to falling in love,
hmm,
and people should be able to go on dates and just get to know one
right,
another.
right,
And yes, your faith and morals are very black and white. You
yeah,
know what they are. You got to be on the same
yeah,
page with them. But sometimes romance is a little overblown,
yeah,
and Hollywood has very much overblown
yeah,
that. And so I don't really like using those terms settle, because
yeah,
I think there's just such a strange definition around that depending on
hmm,
who you're talking to.
yeah,
But I do think there's a lot of fish in the sea. I do think there's a lot of good men out
right,
there.
right,
Maybe they don't have all their ducks in a row,
hmm,
but that doesn't mean you shouldn't give them a chance.
yeah,
And so, it's funny that your advice might be get the career and get the job
uh,
settled. I That was not one of my priorities
mm,
when I was dating
hmm,
or when I was looking for the right
yeah,
partner.
yeah,
My priorities were, is he going to respect me physically?
hmm, Mhm.
And is he going to wait till marriage?
Yeah.
And does he treat his mom well?
Right. Right.
You
Right.
know, because then I think he'll treat me well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Does he value family?
Mhm.
Those are far more important to me
Mhm.
than the job and the career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that those aren't
Yeah.
good
Right.
values to have, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not a dating expert. That's not part of my job description, but I did date a lot before I got married. So if
Yeah.
you want to, send anyone my way, I could give them
Yeah.
some advice.
I'd heard an interview with an author, a secular perspective, but she talked about, yeah, like her values were just kind of crazy off the chart, way too specific.
Yeah,
And she missed like the weightier things that are important in a relationship, things that maybe aren't as flashy, but you find
right.
out in the long run, hey, he's dependable or whatever. And to me, that,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's hard to see as a young person. But what's coming to me right now too is just how much the faith helps us. If we put God first, we're practicing the faith. It seems like all this stuff gets in the right perspective. How we see people, the world, what our life goals are, and stuff. The importance of marriage and family and stuff. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and all of that is fostered in a healthy family environment too, right? So
Right.
good future husbands and wives had good parents, and
Yeah.
good relationships with their siblings,
Yeah.
and healthy respect of authority and boundaries and communication, and all of that starts in the home,
Mm-hmm.
right? It starts with how mom and dad love each other and treat each other, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately how they model that for their children. And yes, and if you've got those priorities right of going to church and living a moral life, then those other things fall into place.
Yeah. Yeah.
The work
Right.
situations, providing for your family, all that, it will fall into place.
Yeah. What do you tell them about like the personal relationship with Jesus kind of part, that makes the whole engine move, just for the leadership forum and things as well? What kind of advice do you give to young people, like how to cultivate that?
Yeah, well, a lot of the programming at the forum is not just great keynote inspirational talks, but we actually have prayer workshops every day.
Yeah.
And so we bring in religious sisters and lay leaders as well to help teach different styles of prayer to the young women. So we've had workshops on Lectio Divina, on Ignatian discernment, on even praying with sacred art as a style of having the Lord speak to you by
Mm-hmm.
looking at a beautiful piece of sacred art. And so helping women to know that there are many different ways to communicate with Jesus, and that you need to do it every day.
Yeah.
And also, I would say one of the really unique and beautiful aspects of the forum is having the religious sisters present, and they pray morning prayer and compline each night with the young women. And so for them to pray the prayer of the church,
Mm-hmm.
in community with all of these different religious sisters from different congregations, the women say it's like a taste of heaven
Hmm.
for them. They see all these women in different color habits, different veils, right?
Right.
They have different charisms and apostolates in their day-to-day work, and they're all praying the same prayer
Right.
and singing the same beautiful songs. And this is in addition to Mass,
Mm.
because we all have the experience of the universal, prayers at the Mass. But that is an experience that the everyday young Catholic woman doesn't get to have, right?
Right.
When
Right.
does she get to go to a convent and pray with sisters?
Right.
She doesn't, right? And
Right.
so to be able to have that experience with all of these different varieties of incredible women leaders in these religious orders is something that's so unforgettable. And I know that the women say it is their inspiration to continuing a daily life with Christ and an intimacy with him, is seeing how just gorgeous the sisters are,
Mm-hmm.
and that is that vision of eternal life, right? Is their union with Christ. They are brides of him, right? They're in union with him in a very unique and beautiful vocation. and their virginity too just really inspires the young women, right? And their deep joy and happiness in their vocation is really beautiful.
Let me talk about that a second, because we preach on the virginity of Mary, and you try to talk about the importance of the doctrine, and it's really, I find it kind of hard in our modern culture to talk about it, because people say, "Well, are you saying is marriage somehow um, evil or bad or something?"
Right.
And how do you? I don't know if this is part of something you get into, and these that would be your forte to talk about, but what is it that maybe young women respect about it, or
Mm.
um,
Yeah, I have certainly heard that argument and sometimes that dismay in
yeah,
young
yeah,
people's voices
yeah,
of feeling that I can't attain holiness unless I become a
right,
religious
right,
sister. And so I do strongly believe that that's part of Given's role in the life of the church, is also to showcase holy lay women
mm-hmm,
and to give them a platform and a voice, right?
mm-hmm,
Women who are serving their families, women who are working in corporate roles, and they are holy,
mm-hmm,
right? And seeking the face of Christ. And that's important for young people to see the complementarity of these different vocations and the different giftedness in
yeah,
each of
yeah,
them. But what's very attractive about virginity to these young people is that they're not seeing it in their day-to-day life, right?
right, right,
I mean, heroes and celebrities are certainly not living a Catholic lifestyle,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so to play frisbee with the sisters, to shoot hoops with them, we have some sisters that go for a jog every morning with some of the young women at the
mm-hmm,
forum. They sit and have meals together, and we have sisters that serve as the MCs, and they're hysterical comedians,
mm,
to be able to laugh with the sisters, to live life with them
yeah,
in very normal, raw,
yeah,
real
right,
ways, and to hear them talk about their struggles too
right, right,
is really inspirational for these young women. And then they see that a life with Christ and that choice to live that union with Him is absolutely fulfilling and satisfying and joyful.
yeah. Yeah, I kind of had a moment like that here. I was, in seminary, and I had my struggles in seminaries at the time, but I remember we had so many priests coming through here, and a lot of times it was just like a pilgrimage group, people coming to see Mother Angelica. There'd be a priest with them. So you'd see a lot of different priests in the sacristy,
Mm-hmm.
and even today we have like intern priests from Africa and India. It's just fascinating to hear their stories. But
Yeah.
for me, it's like all of a sudden it just hit me one day. I said, I like priests. They're like the
Mm.
funniest people. They look happy. They look
Yeah.
fulfilled. And it's like it
Mm.
was attractive. I needed
Right.
to see that.
Right.
And that was a great help for me. It was very simple, but
That's beautiful. And
yeah,
offering those opportunities to young people is very important. And,
yeah,
you mentioned like the Sikh conferences that Focus hosts, and we feel the same way at the Given Forum, that giving young people an opportunity to see holy, happy, healthy
right,
priests and
right,
religious
right.
is so valuable to the future of the church.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? And there's nothing less attractive than a grumpy priest,
right.
or a dowdy sister,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Having just shining examples are really important. And we're all called to do that in all of our states and
right,
lives and our
right.
vocations, is to
Yeah,
be the face of Christ to
right.
others.
Let me just jump back to a second. You talked about like using art in prayer,
Hmm.
and how, what was that method you described? What was the name of it?
We actually call that Visio Divina, and maybe
Ah,
you've heard of that before, but one of our 2016 alum, her name's Katie, she founded and created a beautiful style of praying with sacred art where she has it modeled after the mysteries of the Rosary.
is that Zalesk? Or oh,
No,
okay.
her name's she just got married, so she has a new
Oh,
name.
okay.
uh,
Yeah.
Katie Weiss is
Oh,
her name, but she like one of my favorites. I have the Joyful Mysteries book that she created, and
mhm,
she has this gorgeous painting of the Visitation when Mary and Elizabeth met one another, right? And they both have their pregnant bellies, right? And
mhm,
there's this just amazing laughter that's
Mm.
depicted in this painting, and they're just this awe and wonder of, oh my gosh, right? And to sit and look at that piece of art and just ponder that moment, and it's a more modern take on it than a typical icon, right? Um, is just a beautiful way that I've grown in my prayer life, and to have an image and then maybe some specific scripture verses surrounding that, and then you
Yeah.
can go through that Lectio Divina process of
Right.
you read it through and you sit and you pray and then read it a second time, and then what words kind of struck at you. You do the same thing with the piece of art, right?
Mm.
Oh, well, that the way that she's holding her hand, what's that saying to me, right? Or the expression on her face, what is that saying to me? What's God saying to me through that? So a really beautiful way. And you can actually go on Given's YouTube channel, and we have some talks given by Katie
Mm.
on the Visio Divina method of prayer.
Oh. Yeah, because I guess a lot of people probably have seen some kind of work of art that really struck them. It just seemed like that's happened to
Yes.
me, and then like I'll look at it years later and it doesn't strike me then, but like at the time, like God used it, in a
Yes.
way that is powerful.
Yeah, like the Pieta,
Mm.
the
Yeah.
Saint Teresa of Avila and ecstasy sculpture. I mean, you just think about those incredible pieces of art and how you're moved by them,
Mm.
and God speaks through those opportunities and those circumstances, and
Right.
to actually intentionally spend the time to do that and to ask God to speak to you in that way is a beautiful style of prayer.
Can you think of maybe just a couple stories that kind of capture what Given's about and what your hopes for the program
Yeah.
of young people's experience?
Yeah, no, I would love to talk about some of the young women that just came to the forum this past
Mm-hmm.
year. And so, one young woman named Clarissa, she has a biology degree, and she's, loves science and loves integrating faith and science together. And so she came to the forum, was inspired to take that training she's had and those specific passions that she has and those gifts, and her action plan that she's now executing right now, being assisted by her mentor, is she's writing a bioethics textbook curriculum for high schools, for Catholic high schools. And she's working with a team of folks with their PhD in this area, right, out of different Catholic universities, and getting it peer reviewed and
Mm.
edited and all that. I mean, really collaborating with experts in the field
Yeah.
to be able to pull this off. And I'm just really proud of her.
Mm.
It's something that she's not getting paid to do
Mm.
this, right? It's not a part of her day-to-day job.
Yeah.
This is in addition
Right.
to her everyday
Yeah.
responsibilities that she's completing this
Yeah.
project. It's really incredible.
And I know, I think I come up against that like as in preaching. I think to articulate like the pro-life message of the church's teaching on artificial contraception,
Right.
it's so powerful to say, hey, biology backs us up. This is a human life that's begun distinct from the mother. Or
Right.
even kind of the green movement with women and contraception, that it's not green for the mother to be using this as
It's
damaging her.
not.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's another one of my favorite
Yeah.
action plans of young women. We had a girl named Bridget that came to the inaugural forum in 2016, and she founded a website, blog, online space, you would call it, that's named Managing Your Fertility, where she pulled together all of the different fertility-based awareness methods of family
Yeah.
planning. So if you go on that website, you can read about all the different methods. You can also find access to local doctors, pro-life doctors in your area. You punch in your zip code, you
Mhm.
find a doctor, right? And she also has stories of women who are practicing these methods, and
Mhm.
practically, right, can say, this was my experience, this is what worked, this is how I can do this, right? And the amazing thing is that if you go on that website, you wouldn't know that it's Catholic.
Mm.
Right? It's modern, beautifully designed, green, right?
Mhm.
Right? It's attractive to any
Yeah,
woman, right,
yeah.
who's looking for an alternative
Right.
to artificial contraception, and looking for a way just to know her body, right,
Yeah.
and to know the way that God designed her. But that's an incredible resource that she created as her action plan out of the Given Forum.
I think that's a great example too of like women's gifts, what they bring to it. I remember during one of the election cycles recently, they had these kind of high profile women uh, politicians, and they were talking about issues like pregnancy care and
Sure.
all those issues. And I didn't like some of their solutions,
Yeah.
but the issues are being talked about. It's like
Mhm.
they're bringing it to family issues, I guess we could sum it up as.
Sure.
And I thought, yeah, I remember John Paul, saying we need women's influence in the political sphere, all spheres of culture, society.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like they're highlighting, we need better solutions here. And the Catholic Church needs to get in there, So we need women
Yes.
who are motivated for this. Even naturally, they do it, and let's let the church guide them, in its teaching and stuff.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, John Paul II was such a champion for women and a champion for the giftedness and the unique giftedness that they bring to every decision-making table,
Right.
right? That women have a unique perspective simply by the characteristics of their body, right?
Yeah.
That they have this innate nurturing characteristic to be able to hold a life within themselves, right? Makes them always thinking about the other, right?
Yeah.
Seeking the good of the other,
Right.
protecting the most vulnerable, which is an unborn life, right? And so that is something that just is so wonderful about John Paul II and all that he has done for women, and encouraging them to have their voices heard and to be advocates in all of those different spheres.
Yeah. It really humanizes culture. It makes it a little bit softer and gentler. And you see that with men. I love to see that transformation in men. Like a guy gets married and, he starts to mature. And I think, to me, my impression, and I saw this in my family dynamic, was just, it's like the mother, the wife is making him aware of these needs,
Right.
like we did,
Like be a little more sensitive. Yeah.
right. And the
Right.
roof's leaking, this is like stuff. And she can
That's
feather
funny.
the nest, if she's got her, whatever protection and stuff. But yeah, like I describe it too that, it's like the guy starts having kids, and then like his kids are going to go to the bus stop, and they got to leave the home and walk to that. Now, what's between here and the bus stop? What? I think it fires them up for them to care about it's not just them thinking about themselves, their own survival, but hey, I need to, this culture needs to be better. This neighborhood needs to be better, whatever.
Right.
Or even like my daughter's going into this workforce, and now these work issues matter to me because my daughter's out there. And
Right.
so
well, and that is mothers, fathers, physical and spiritual, right? And that's something that no matter your state in life, right, that we all are called to as women, right, to be mothers to all, and the same for men, to be fathers to all. And yes, physical motherhood and fatherhood kind of probably heightens that maybe a little faster, but we all are called to those same characteristics. And that's something that is very attractive about the religious sisters, is that they just exude spiritual motherhood, right? You just feel that care and compassion that they have for humanity, and that they have all these beautiful spiritual children. And so they model that for many of these single women who come to the forum that think, oh, am I ever going to get married? Am I ever going to have children? And it's okay if you don't, right? Even if you're single in that state in life for the rest of your life, you can still be a mother, right? And how do you live out that spiritual motherhood is something that the sisters just do a great job of teaching the women.
I tell this story. I was at a conference, a married conference one time, and I don't know, it was like a few hundred people were there, and in between talks, the people had seen me on EWTN, so they wanted to come up and talk to me. And it was mostly women at the conference. But I remember I was so struck by, in this line that was coming to talk to me, there were some guys, but everyone, literally every one of the women asked for me to pray for somebody. Like they were worried about this family member, this friend. The guy would come up and tell me his own conversion story. He did
Right.
not one of them asked me to pray for anybody, but it just struck me. It's like, man, they, you know, it's the personal, and it's like the individual.
Right.
I think men can kind of jump maybe to the bigger scene. Okay, we're gonna get this project going. We're gonna serve these people, whatever. But it's like the women are like, oftentimes what my experience has been, they're like content to help this person,
Right.
and it might take decades, but they're gonna
Right.
do this person, And I marvel at it. It just always strikes me, and clearly God has placed it on their heart to pray for people. I mean, I just hear that
Yes.
all the time. I mean, women just that spiritual maternity to pray for this individual and to,
Women are great
yeah,
intercessors. That's
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Well, I think a beautiful story that illustrates that. So, my own
Mm-hmm.
mentor was one of my former bosses at the Archdiocese, and she was the superintendent of Catholic schools and a mother of four. So she modeled for
Mm-hmm.
me work-life balance and just a beautiful example of professionalism and living out her motherhood as well. But my story is that she was the only woman on the senior staff that advised the Archbishop. Okay. So she's the 1%, right,
Mm-hmm.
of bringing the feminine genius
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of tough conversations. And I was working at the Archdiocese at the time that some school closures took place, which that's still happening
Mm-hmm.
all across the country, right? And so there was a very different perspective from the men looking at the bottom
Yeah,
line, and we've
yeah,
got to make this
yeah.
decision, right? There's no other option. And she agreed,
Mm-hmm.
but she also brought a very maternal, feminine perspective to the way it was communicated out to the families,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if she wasn't there, it
Mm-hmm.
would have been a pretty tight, harsh bye-bye, right?
Yeah.
But instead, she went personally
Mm-hmm.
to the community, held a town
Yeah,
hall, and that was ugly, right?
yeah.
But she took it,
Right,
right?
right.
She went through that
Yeah,
sacrifice and loved those people enough
yeah,
to tell them
yeah.
to their face, right?
Right.
Rather than getting a letter, right?
Yeah.
And so I just saw her execute her gifts. And while she was outnumbered, she
Mm-hmm.
was very courageous in knowing that this is the right thing to do and this is the best way to carry out this difficult decision. And I've always been impacted by that and in many other ways
Yeah,
that she just was an
yeah,
incredible leader. But I know that there are gifts that women bring
yeah.
to all different spheres, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how helpful they are. And ultimately, produce great results, right? By
Yeah.
bringing those sensitivities to
Right, right.
those conversations.
Maybe we'll just close with this question. And it seems like America's been beating its head against this since the Industrial Revolution. But the work-life balance for married life, especially for women today, talk about that. You've learned something from your own struggles. You married, three
Mm-hmm.
kids. Tell us about how do you balance it?
How do I balance it? A very supportive partner. I do think that culture is changing, that the men and the fathers are assuming more of the caretaking responsibilities. Like a little example will be I'm here on this work trip right
Mm-hmm.
now, right? And I have certainly had people ask me questions like, well, who's watching the kids?
Yeah.
My husband is,
Yeah.
right? It's 50-50 here,
Yeah.
right? We are both parents to
Yeah.
these children. And
So when he's with the kids, it's not called babysitting.
Right,
It's called,
right.
it's called being a
Not
father.
babysitting.
Right?
He is caring for his own children. And I absolutely see a shift even from my own parents' generation to my own, my parents' generation to my generation of men very easily are assuming caretaking roles in the family. And I think a shift in that is things as simple as different policies that employers are enacting where dads get paternity leave these days. They don't call it paid maternity leave. They'll call it paid family leave because men and women can help care for children, new adopted children, parents who are sick, right? Both men and women can provide care for others. And so thankfully, I think that has been an easy shift in my own life, but also I married a great guy and I have a lot of local family in the area. So my answer to the work-life balance is you have to be on the same page with your spouse on the responsibilities, and also that you have a network of support, hopefully family, blood, relatives, but there's always incredible support in our Catholic faith and in our Catholic community, and being willing and, gutsy enough to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for talking with us. It's been great.
Thank you, Father.